Hi, I'm Julieanne Kost. With the help of artificial intelligence, Adobe Camera Raw can automatically generate a synthetic depth map based on the content of an image. This way, we can change the focus plane and quickly create a narrow or shallow depth of field in a photograph. In the Lens Blur panel, I'll click Apply, and Camera Raw will use AI to automatically detect the subject and add a blur to the background. We can use the Blur Amount slider in order to decrease or increase the amount of the blur. If I want to manually override the automatic subject detection to blur a different area, we can select the point or area focus icon. If I click in these windows, then they'll become in focus. If I click down here, then just the foreground is in focus. We can also adjust the focal area using the focal range bar. We can reposition the rectangle to change the focal area, and we can drag either edge of the rectangle to contract or expand the focal range. Then I can click in the image area and the focal area will shift to that area, but the focal range will remain the same size. To see an overlay of the AI-generated depth map, we can enable Visualize Depth. The color overlay in the image corresponds to the colors in the focal range bar. With Visualize Depth enabled, as you reposition or expand or contract the rectangle, the areas that are in focus are displayed in white, while yellow and purple represent the areas outside of the focal range and will be blurred. You can also temporarily preview the Visualize Depth option by Option dragging on Mac or Alt dragging on Windows and resizing or repositioning the rectangle. Lens Blur also adds a bokeh or bokeh to the image to make the blur look more natural. You can choose from 5 different aperture shapes and use the boost slider to decrease or increase the effect. Now, to manually refine the depth map, we can use the disclosure triangle to access the brush refinement tools. I'll begin by selecting Blur, and we can use the amount to adjust the strength of the blur. We can change the brush size and feather or the softness of the brush edge. And we can adjust the flow slider to adjust the speed at which the brush applies the adjustment. I'll enable Auto Mask so that Camera Raw can help detect edges based on contrast and color when painting. Then I'll paint in the area that I want to blur. If needed, I can adjust the blur amount after painting. If there's another area that I want to blur the same amount, I can continue painting. And if I need to, I can adjust the amount, and both areas that I painted will be adjusted. Now, if I want to change the amount of blur that I add in another area of the image, I'll click the plus icon, which will commit to those refinements. To blur the wall a bit more, I'll disable Auto Mask and then paint. Now when I change the amount, only the paint strokes after I click the plus icon were adjusted. If there are areas that I want to paint in focus, I would choose Focus, select the amount, and then paint over the areas. For now, I'll use Command-Z on Mac or Control-Z on Windows to undo that. You can always click Reset to reset the manual refinements. And to reset the focal range to the automatic subject detection, we could double-click within the rectangle or select the subject focus icon. Alright, let's use the eye icon to preview the image without lens blur and then with lens blur applied. To speed up your workflow, after applying lens blur to one image, we can select another image and choose Apply Previous, but that would apply all of the previous changes that we've made, like cropping and other adjustments. For now, I'll use Command-Z on Mac or Control-Z on Windows to undo that. I'll return to the original image that I added the lens blur to, and for more control, I'll choose Copy Selected Edit Settings. Then I'll choose to check None and select the lens blur. If I leave Focus on Subject enabled, Camera Raw will analyze each image independently, find the subject, and then apply the same lens blur adjustments. If I uncheck Focus on Subject, then Camera Raw will apply the exact same depth map and settings to the images. Then I'll move to the next image and choose Paste Edit Settings. We can also apply lens blur to multiple images. I'll select these 2 images, apply lens blur, and increase the amount. I'll change the bokeh and increase the boost. These 3 changes that we've made will be made to all of our selected images. Lens blur can also be included in a preset. In fact, there's several new adaptive blur background presets which apply lens blur with a single click. To include lens blur in our own presets, we can return to the Edit stack, apply the lens blur settings, then choose the preset icon, click the new icon, and give the preset a name and specify a group. I'll select Check None, and then choose Lens Blur. For additional flexibility, I'll choose Support a Mount Slider. Now, when I apply that preset to another image, I can use the amount slider to increase or decrease the effect of the preset. Finally, if a photo has a depth map from a camera, for example, images taken in portrait mode on an iPhone, Camera Raw will use the depth map created by the device by default. If you prefer Camera Raw to create a synthetic depth map instead, click the three dots that appear with images that contain depth maps and choose to uncheck Use Device Depth. I'm Julieanne Kost. Thanks for watching.